Animal Crossing is one of those franchises that is so difficult to explain to people why it's so good. You just have to get people to take the plunge and get lost in its cozy rhythm. People have been clamouring for a Switch Animal Crossing since the console was announced, and then I don't even think Nintendo were quite ready for how popular the series had become. Coinciding with the start to an endless plague of misery that people needed an escape from, the amount of popularity that New Horizons got at the time in terms of sales, memes, online discussions, it was crazy, and I'm sure the Nintendo execs needed corrective lenses because of the thick dollar signs in their eyes. Initially, it got rave critic reviews and was a smash hit with consumers, even so far as being referenced as a way to improve mental health during the pandemic and used in President Biden's political campaign. So, why did so many people seem to think that it was a weak entry to the series? Not necessarily everyone, but a general consensus of people I know, people online, and reviewers I trust had the same opinion.
Now, the way this game works is that I played this for 100 hours and went, oh, that was a good game, whereas Leah played this for 500 hours and went, yeah, this one was pretty weak, actually.
Do you like Animal Crossing's New Horizons, Yahtzee? Say that's the wrong question. Of course I don't, but I still play it. It's full of little annoyances I could nitpick about, but I strongly suspect it's the flaws that make it absorbing.
Because I heard a lot of, like, you know, now that people have, like, calmed down about Animal Crossing, the newest one, I've heard a lot of people being like, you know, it is good, but it does feel like it's lacking in a lot of ways, and that they're adding in the functions that were in the previous ones.
Literally all the add-ons that they're currently adding now, it's all in Wildwood.
I asked some of my friends for their thoughts about the game. These friends don't play video games as excessively as me or Otis do, so it would be good to get a range of perspectives. Here are a couple of quotes from my friends. The additional features overcomplicate the game, making it a bit overwhelming. I enjoyed the simplicity and relaxing nature of Wild World more. The online stuff is good, but it's frustrating. It pauses every time someone arrives or leaves, making 2-minute tasks take 10 to 15 minutes. I liked more customization, but it made it feel like a different game, anything other than Animal Crossing. Regardless, a common through line from the discussion around this game is that people quit the game far quicker than previous entries. I think I got more than a year in most of the other entries, especially New Leaf and Wild World, and yet I barely lasted 4 months with New Horizon. It isn't to say that people shouldn't enjoy the game, I still see some incredible towns being made and shown off, and it's really impressive, but for a game that I view as being more geared towards a community and online aspect, it should have lasted far longer, but it didn't. Now, I'm going to look into potential reasons as to why. The first of these reasons may come down to the promise of consistent updates for 2 years at least. At the height of its popularity in March and April, the promise of an ever-changing landscape with regular, almost monthly events that add a slew of new content was a tantalising prospect. Yet I was more sceptical. Red and his paintings weren't added until April 23rd, more than a month after launch, and certain Nintendo items weren't added until February 2021. The first few updates felt like big gameplay updates that didn't make it into the March release. Different types of bushes or flowers, deep sea diving for creatures, and the dream feature which essentially acts as a snapshot of an island design at a certain time. These specific updates felt like they weren't finished for the original release and were kept back for content updates, so they could meet their March deadline. When the mobile game Pocket Camp gets far more frequent updates and cosmetic additions, players can't help but feel saddened. As of May 1st, 2021, there have been 10 updates, one of these being a Hello Kitty update, and the most recent version essentially just adding 18 new items from all I can find. Common complaints were that Pocket Camp had a bigger variety of items which were integrated into the world better with far more unique animations. Obviously, it shouldn't be that another game is doing X, therefore why don't they put X in Y, as it isn't as easy as that. But perhaps the expectation was far greater considering the previous games had monthly events in the calendar anyway, so imagine what the combination of this and free rollout DLC would be like. thus leading to disappointment when the Halloween and Christmas updates essentially give a few more items in a crafting recipe, what you would kind of expect at the Halloween and Christmas events anyway. Perhaps the first few updates were a bit misleading considering the amount of gameplay additions they made, which leads me to suspect that they were cut gameplay features meant for the original release. In conjunction to this, another common disappointment seems to be missing features. Brewster's Cafe is still shockingly missing. Certain classic NPCs like Tortimer, Cap'n, Katrina, Rossetti, Lyle, Dr. Shrunk and Gracie are all missing. There are no mini-games like previous versions. Villagers don't visit your home, and there's no gyroid furniture. Games shouldn't need to include everything from a previous game as a standard, let me make that clear, but you expect it to build upon the fun parts of previous games. I find it difficult to believe that these features weren't considered, at least. Now, I'm not here to say what I would do differently, this isn't the video series where I would do that yet. But the bigger focus on online aspects can be clearly seen with how the game is designed around being a shared experience. Instead of shops or certain vendors being persistent, there is now a bigger focus on weekly events. Kicks, Label, Leaf, etc. All of these vendors turn up once a week, which I believe is to encourage people to visit friends' towns for their vendors and for each day to hold something different. However, it does start to wear out as welcome a few weeks in when you finally get the ability to customize the island, and then the limited content elsewhere and the restrictions become obvious. Also, I find it surprising the lack of variety in things that can be traded to different friends, considering the bigger shift in visiting friends' islands online as a focus. There aren't more specific island variants of items, flowers, fruits, builds, etc. to encourage more sharing of resources with friends online. Also, you can't have multiple islands per Switch, which I also find a baffling decision for a game that seems to be focused around its sharing, but Nintendo has really never been online savvy. The real thing that gets to me is instead of Red visiting once a week, it's now random chance that he may visit on a Monday, which means that the wait time to collect paintings has now increased quite a lot. I just don't understand these decisions, frankly. I don't understand why the fruits have gone down from New Leaf. I don't understand why you can't visit different islands and have different persistent shops for like plants or for shoes and other cosmetic items. Crafting items in bulk. Being able to decorate starter villager homes, customizing items during crafting, pulling crafting materials from the house storage, splitting stacks how you want, not using pocket space for tools, showing if things have been donated before speaking to Blathers, buying multiples of clothing, options to turn off catching dialogue and the little puns that come after you catch a bug or a fish, and ground highlights for placing furniture, gardening or terraforming. And once you see the video that Nick Hard did, you sort of start to wonder why Nintendo didn't just take some of these ideas and run with them, considering there's quite a big fan request for these things. Now, perhaps it was because these changes weren't in Nintendo's vision, but it's far more likely that they just don't have a big enough team to help with this development. It seems there hasn't been as much emphasis on the regular updates afterwards. Much against the 2-year idea that they said at the start. The only real major quality of life improvement over New Leaf is that you can use a pole to cross rivers and a ladder to climb walls. And while this does make traversing the island easier, exacerbates the fact you have to pause and swap tools very slowly in the menu, or using the wheel. But a lesser quality of life didn't cause, well, at least according to the statements I've heard, drop off so quickly in the other games in the franchises. So that cannot be the sole reason. So onto the crafting aspect of the game, which had me rolling my eyes when it was first shown off in the trailers. But they put that with the decent amount of customization that you had for your own paradise, and it's praised for its seeming natural evolution of the Animal Crossing formula. But what I suspect is that the sheer amount of personalization you can do with patterns and terraforming is what creates these incredibly unique towns you'll see. The actual crafting element I find to be quite underbaked. There isn't real progression or many interesting combinations for furniture recipes. It usually comes down to 2 or 3 event contextual items which you'll need a big portion of to make the cooler items, or at least the furniture components, such as star fragments or rusted parts. For the first 5 days, you have the joy of finding something new or a different goodie to potentially craft. But after that, you realise quite how limiting the system is and how few times you actually craft furniture items after that. This is where the online should be the selling point. You start on an island with minimal resources or recipes that progresses slowly as you make the island your own. When you travel to your friends' islands, you find crafting recipes that they have found, fruit, furniture, all sorts, and you make it a big collaborative effort to help each other. Having thousands of new furniture pieces or clothing items, lots of different fruits and flower variants, and the sharing of knowledge gained would have made the experience much better in my opinion. But it is very limiting what you can and can't do online. It would have been great if you could have just made a recipe you already have to share it with your friends. If you go over to a friend's town and you have a neighbour there that you want to come to your island, they could have a quote-unquote twin. Have unique crafting materials or something you can collect because you're travelling to someone else's town. Make that experience worthwhile. Unfortunately, Nintendo is still about a decade behind with online features, and it takes an age to navigate the menus just to bring mates over to your island. Even then, you can't share fish or bugs that you've caught. There aren't many activities or interactions to actually be had in the island apart from looking at each other's nice cool furniture and picking up certain items they've dropped.
The world is just so interactive. You know?
And definitely pausing the game for 2 minutes at a time to say hello or goodbye is mega frustrating when you can have multiple people over. It's such a good idea making the game more community focused, but Nintendo just still doesn't seem to get how to use online properly. There are 3 types of Animal Crossing players. The collectors, people who want to get every fish, fossil and bug, along with the furniture sets they like. Me. The creators, people who have infinite creativity, who instead of thinking if they should, they wonder if they could. And the escapists, people who enjoy the atmosphere of their world and use it as a means of Zen meditation to escape the harsh realities of life. It begins in a way that other games do, but whereas they usually take 2 to 3 days to have the majority of the world accessible and its mechanics laid bare, in New Horizons I found it annoying as a collector as there were areas inaccessible. I felt my time in that month had become shorter and I couldn't catch and collect the things that I needed. My creative friends felt stifled in their tools and often felt the need to time travel to access the content that they actually wanted. My escapist friends, well, they still loved it. They still got the Zen experience. However, they did seem to agree there was a bigger sense of emptiness and less of a connection with their neighbours. I didn't feel any of the charm that sucks you in like previous Animal Crossing games had. I don't know if it's because of the limit of the features that you unlock and how slow they become, but it instilled a sense of hesitation to get attached to anything for the rest of the game. Now, the most damning thing is that the most potent memories I have from the game is the sense of emptiness I got from the starting weeks, and maybe that's on me. I don't know. But it's how I felt. I don't know how true this is for other people, but I feel this sense of, again, emptiness from the game. Placing furniture all over the item is great, but a good majority of it isn't very interactable, and it feels more like a diorama. I still don't feel like the islanders, while they have cuter idle animations like reading or eating a donut, they don't feel like my neighbours. There isn't much interaction or warmth as I felt in the previous games. Their personalities seem to be sanded down and quite non-offensive, and it doesn't give them the wacky charm the originals had. Those previous games had like a town of strange residents you grow fond of or you hate, but at least you have emotional connection with. That aspect is missing from New Horizons, as it's all well and good making your own perfect version of Mario, but if you can't fill it with bizarre people, it just feels like a Minecraft creation instead of your own community. I really enjoyed multiple shops and city folks, and it changed each day, so we had a big chunk of new things to check out. And in New Horizons, with the Nuke Miles achievements, the certain things you could buy using these, the potential for loads of different shops coming to your island over the course of months, and the different crafting recipes, I felt like there was a lot of potential stuff to do over the course of a year, but ultimately, it quickly felt quite hollow. When you started crafting, within the first 2 weeks I was getting duplicate recipes, and you weren't getting many new ones every day. Nuke Mile achievements, they felt great to start with and loads of different things, but quickly you realise there's nothing to spend your Nuke Miles on within a month. Perhaps there could have been more recipes tied to achievements, and depending on how good your town was rated or how friendly you were with your neighbours, you would get different recipes or different things to purchase. I don't know. I do really want to avoid saying what I would change, but a big part of Animal Crossing is settling in and relaxing in the atmosphere, visiting your neighbours and feeling at home. Adding more tasks to do rather than fishing and catching bugs is great for people like me, but I would prefer that they at least had weight and impact on the island and villagers, rather than just collecting Gamerscore Xbox achievements. They're just good ideas that weren't fully fleshed out to fulfill their full potential. I think the core problem comes from the fact that Animal Crossing New Horizons feels more factory line created, rather than something personal. People loved coming home and flipping open their second fantasy home with their neighbours that were all wacky and strange and had different charming, quirky personalities. But the soul of the game seems to have been neglected in favour of other things added to it, to update the formula for a Switch generation, which is a real shame, as that's the real aspect people play Animal Crossing for in the first place. I genuinely wonder, if it wasn't for the collapse of society as we know it, would the initial praise and love of this game have been so fierce? However, I'm very thankful for Animal Crossing in its place for helping people during this horrid time, and I don't want to be someone so cynical in saying that people's enjoyment is wrong. All I really want game studios to do is to create a piece of art that makes people smile, and to use their previous experience to create something special.
Me quick now, me now. Me quick, me now, oh now.